Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this important conversation. I want to thank the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh for partnering with us on this virtual event. My name is Justin Forzano, and I'm the founder and CEO of Open Field. We are a social impact organization using soccer to improve the lives and futures of youth, primarily in West Africa, in Cameroon, and in Western Pennsylvania, right here in Pittsburgh. We believe that intentionally designed sports programs and the relationships that are formed on playing fields are a catalyst for community development and positive social change around the world. For the last 10 years, we've strived to do our own part and make a difference through community-based soccer leagues that create opportunities for learning and play, for cultural exchange and travel, and promote health, education, peace building, gender equity, and girls' empowerment. And with this in mind, we thought it wise to invite our friends and colleagues and supporters to come together this year ahead of International Women's Day to discuss the important role that sport plays in building and enhancing leadership skills in girls and young women around the world. So earlier this week, when we were preparing for today's event, one of the panelists said something that truly made my jaw drop. In response to one of the questions, Akom Caroline, who is one of the founding members of our team who's joining us from Cameroon today, said the following: parents will sell their daughter for a bride price and use that money to pay their son's school fees. So now I'd like to think that she was exaggerating. However, I believe this is not too far off from the reality that so many girls face in Cameroon and across the world. And so I share this with you in advance of our conversation today to remind us of the urgency and the importance of this topic and the implications that extend far beyond the playing field. So I want to thank you all once more for joining us, and I would like to introduce Gwen Shem, who will be moderating the conversation today. Gwen played 4 years of collegiate soccer at Frostburg State University and now serves as the social media coordinator for Open Field.
Thanks, Justin, and thank you all for being here today. This is super cool for me, and I'm super excited. And also, before we get started, I just, like, the traveler in me thinks it's so cool that so many places are represented. So I just wanted to point that out before we went ahead and get started. So why don't we kick off the conversation? And it would be great if all of our panelists could introduce themselves and share who you are, what you do, and your definition of leadership.
Were you gonna pick us in particular, or do we randomly start talking?
You can go first.
Oh. All right, so my name is Isabel Julian. I'm one of those people not in Pittsburgh. I'm in Montreal, Canada. I am an animator. I run a museum on the environment. I'm a biologist by profession, but I've been coaching soccer for over 29 years. I started coaching when I was 14 because I wanted my sister to have better opportunities than I did growing up playing soccer. So my whole purpose of getting into coaching was I wanted my sister to be better off than I was. She's now also the better player of the two of us, but I'll accept that. In terms of leadership, leadership is a tough word to define because I think there are very many different types of leaders. And on a soccer team, your leader isn't always the one wearing the captain's band. The one wearing the captain's band is usually the one that has the most confidence to be able to stand up to the referee, to get messages across, etc., but is not necessarily the key leader on the field or the key person to make the team go forward. So leadership is really that, for me, is that person that can inspire and motivate others to reach their potential, to reach a goal, to reach something higher than themselves. And it's not always the loudest and the most charismatic person. Sometimes it's that person that'll take you off to the side and give you the support that you need when you need it. I'm stopping myself.
Should I go next since in my screen I'm right next to you, so I'll go next. I'm like you, Isabel. I feel like I can talk for a long time, so feel free to cut me off if you need to. My name is Nora Dooley. I am from the United States. I'm from the Boston area, but I'm currently in Dublin, Ireland. Long COVID story for another day. I work for an organization called Coaches Across Continents, and we have been partners with Open Field since I think 2014, maybe even before. I was lucky to go to Cameroon and work with Caroline and the Open Field team in 2015, which feels like a lifetime ago. And I have been traveling all over the world for about 7-8 years, working with people like Caroline and her team to support them to use play and sport as a tool for social impact, which is very different from the way that I grew up, which is playing competitive soccer my whole life. And we'll talk about that more today, but I'm really excited to explore that with you all and figure out how we can challenge traditional sports so that we make sure there are actual leadership and development opportunities for everyone, especially girls and women. And leadership, yeah, tough question. I feel like there's so many different versions of it. So quickly, I think for me, leadership is being able to investigate yourself and figure out how you might be contributing to things that you actually don't want to contribute to, and figure out how you can evolve and listen to other people and be open to new ideas and to change. So thank you. Very happy to be here today. Thank you, Open Field, for having me.
Thank you. Now, Nene, Caroline, would you be willing to introduce yourselves next? You're on mute.
All right, I'm called Ikoinene. I've been working with OpenField for 10 years now. I'm presently the Director of Operations and Programming in Cameroon office. My own idea about leadership is taking an action to develop others. And you have to prioritize your personal development because you cannot give what you don't have. So you have to be a role model to the youth you are working with so that they can listen to you. That is my own idea about leadership.
Yeah, I'm Akom Caroline. I'm the finance head of OpenField. I've been working with OpenField for almost 10 years now. To me, leadership is taking action, leading a community, a group, or an organization. And like any other, you have to be a role model, either to your community, your organization, or whatever group you are leading. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Finkel?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. And I am so delighted to be part of this group this morning in this conversation. I'm a faculty member in the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh, and I co-direct the Gender Inequality Research Lab. I teach courses on gender and development as my paid job, and but I do have a secret and so not secret mission in life, that is to kind of get everybody to think about gendered inequalities as they go on to do their beautiful jobs and professions all around the world. And I would be amiss if I don't mention my one stronghold onto fame, and that is to have known Justin when he was a Gispian and to watch him on the sidelines as he carefully and very passionately taught about the power of sports as a means to start breaking gendered barriers, first in Cameroon and now also in Pittsburgh. So it is an understatement to say that I'm extremely proud to see how it all evolved over the years. And I'm a strong supporter of everything that he does. I'm on the sidelines. I love soccer. Moving to US 20 years ago, you know, compared to all of you who have done this professionally and much more credentially, I have been an observer of soccer, and I love it. So thank you to all of you who do the support for all of us. In terms of leadership definition, I think I am all on the same page. I have the disadvantage of studying this stuff, so my head gets cluttered among all the scholarly definition. But Justin's question this week kind of gave me a chance to sit back and look at critically what I was thinking about leadership, and what Isabel said already, and Nora and everybody else, Nene and Carolina mentioned, resonates with me as well, because I think despite everything out there that defines leader as visible, as charismatic, as loud, as role models, I think my own leadership vision is also very much muted. I kind of think an effective leader is not the one that kind of shines the light on themselves, but it is rather let the cause be the most important issue as they kind of gather people and motivate people. I also agree that it is the one that kind of brings the best in all of us, right? Without us knowing, and kind of encouraging us to kind of live up to our potential. And then maybe a little bit in addition, I keep thinking the definition of leadership and success is not uniform, and I think it's like an effective leader allows the members to see that there isn't one definition, one look of success, one definition of power. There are multiple ways, and that enables us to kind of see ourselves as powerful and leader in our own way. So I think I like that diversity. The leaders that I see as effective and really able to drive change are the ones to kind of are open to challenge themselves. And they allow us to see that there is like the inclusion is not just a buzzword. It is indeed, it's inclusive of ideas, inclusive of diversity. And within that diversity, we find different metrics of power and leadership. So I look forward to being part of this conversation.
Thank you. And thank you all for introducing yourself. I think this will be a great conversation. Not only do we have people from all over the world, but we have a diverse range of experiences that I think are all brought together by the common love for sport. We have also a multitude of definitions of leadership, whether that's being a role model, taking action, inspiring and motivating. So I think this will be a really good one today. So Dr. Finkel, based on your research, what challenges do women in leadership face today, and what skills do they need to overcome those challenges?
I think I gave away my punchline already. I really think one of the most important barriers for leadership is that this understanding is there's only one type of a leader. And it is, be it in scholarship, be it in the way that we see, is often defined by masculine traits, right? It's defined by effectiveness, it's defined by efficiency, and somehow all the years that I've studied gender, I don't understand, but they're always like attached to masculine traits. So I think that when success and leadership is defined that way, it is easier for many of us to opt out of self-select ourselves from leadership positions, because we don't necessarily see ourselves being that success, being that one type of leader. So I think the most important remaining leadership, you all understand, I can cite your references in terms of what goodness happens to the world when women are in leadership positions, be it in politics, be it in decision-making, private sector, right? You all know all this already, but I think, so knowing that is one thing, but still kind of portraying success as one way allows us to kind of self-select. Many of us self-select out of positions of leadership because we don't necessarily see it, we don't necessarily feel it, and we think that that's not us, and then we're not interested anymore. So the most important task going forward, I was looking at the history of the International Women's Day. It turns out it's the 110th year this year. So if you're still celebrating, if you're still thinking that there's work to be done, I think my hope and wish going for future would be to kind of diversify the types of leaders, right? Diversify the types of leadership traits. make sure that we see empathetic leaders as just as effective leaders. We see cooperative leaders just as effective leaders and efficient leaders. And we kind of start valuing the long-term vision. We don't just put the prime on a stack of a short-term efficiency, right? So that drives different kind of personalities to forward. And to all of those, when I was thinking what makes it better and diverse is that lack of empathy now from that uniform definition of an effective leader or cooperation, the value that we do not put on cooperation. I think what you guys are doing through sports, it inherently brings that to the forefront, which is not always the case, right? It's not the case for politics, it's not the case for policy making, but within sports, there is that inherent need to cooperate. You can't just be one person in a soccer team, even if you're the best one, right? You need your team behind it. So I wish we could bring more of the sports leadership to the rest of all areas of leadership. And I will go ahead and say the buzzword. It would have been a much better word, and it will be a much better word for everybody's sake. So I think that's the bit that Gwen and that I can bring from the study of leadership, that there isn't enough diversity in the definition of leadership, even though we know it would be so much better. The outcomes would be better for everybody else. We don't have it. When I think about why that is the case, it's not that women do not think of these things. I think they just self-select themselves because they don't see themselves in these traditionally masculinely defined roles. We need to define leadership better. We need to value different types of leaders more and appreciate them more so that, young girls and women and boys can see themselves being a different kind of a leader, the one who likes to cooperate, the one who likes to have empathy, the one who can just plan for the long-term success.
Thank you. That was awesome. And I think that's definitely something that we've seen is that women self-select out of it because, like you mentioned, they don't see themselves fitting into that definition of leadership. So like you had mentioned, diversifying the types of leaders, incorporating others, being empathetic and not being afraid to showcase those traits is definitely a good thing that sport can help with. So thank you for that. That was a perfect segue. So Nene and Caroline, I know Justin introduced it a little bit earlier, but can you share more about the typical experience of a girl in Cameroon?
Okay, thank you, Gwen. For a typical country like Cameroon, the girls are not given opportunities to go to school. And we all can testify that a woman who goes to school has advantages of more to do so many things. So most of them are not given the opportunity to go to school. Now they cannot develop themselves because they are either shy, they are either timid, or they don't see themselves. The worst sin is leadership. Sometimes they think women cannot be put in position, just boys or men. In the cities, it's improving, but in our local community where we are, we see a great barrier. And our programs in open field, we have been struggling to break those barriers by giving the opportunity in the pitch to exercise their talent and giving the opportunity that they can do better. So that is our typical example of a young girl growing up in our community in Cameroon.
Yeah, with me, I always refer from the community where I come from. In the community, a girl child is not given an opportunity to talk when others talk, especially in a society where there are men. Talk less, going to the field. In the community where I come from, they think sport is meant only for boys and men. So with open field, we're able to break that barrier to let them know that it's for everyone. So through open field, we're able to remove some of those girls from their boxes. So that's a typical Cameroon girl.
Thank you both. Thank you for sharing more about that experience, and whether it's the masculine traits that define leadership or the lack of education that girls face in Cameroon, there are definitely hardships that girls face across the world. So thank you, Dr. Finkel and Nene and Caroline, for kind of sharing more about those. So our next question is for Nora and Isabel. And Nora, I'll let you answer first this time. But what successful strategies have you seen in your work that support the development of leadership skills in girls and women?
Great question. Thank you. So I feel like in order to answer this question, I have to share a little bit about the background that I alluded to. So I come from traditional sports world, and I grew up, oh, spotlight, hello. I grew up with a very traditional understanding of what sport is and what it can do and what leadership is and what it looks like. And I think we share that across the world in some ways. I also learned from traveling that a lot of people look to the United States as a place where girls and women have lots of leadership opportunities and definitely lots of opportunities in sport. But it's a specific kind of opportunity. And in some ways, I feel like I was lucky because I fit into the traditional box of what being good at sport was. In other ways, I think I was unlucky because my value as a human being and as a woman was so tied up in my value in the game and my value as a soccer player. And that is still hard for me now. I'm 30 years old and I'm still figuring out why that happened and how we can stop doing that with girls and women and boys and men and everybody, so that, yeah, value is much more multiple. It's not just, based on one thing that you do. And also looking at sport and saying, okay, what are we doing wrong here? Because sport, we love to praise how much it can do, but it has to be intentional. And I know Open Field does so much to make sure that it is intentional. And at CAC, Coaches Across Continents, we call it purposeful play. We actually shifted intentionally from sport for social impact years ago, because we realized that what we were doing is actually much more play than sport. Sport being two teams trying to score more points than another, or trying to better your skills in the traditional sense of what it means to be good. And play being free and open and exploratory and exciting and for everybody. It does not matter if you fit into that traditional box of what it means to be talented or good or a leader. So the strategies that I've seen and lived and experienced and I'm working on for myself personally, and that I support other coaches with and organizations with, is really examining, like, how can we shift value systems? How can we shift definitions of what sport is, definitions of what good is, definitions of what leadership is, what development and growth is, and make sure that we're not perpetuating the things that we actually disagree with while we are playing sport and doing all these things that we think are wonderful, but can actually cause a lot of harm for both, if a girl or woman does fit into that traditional box, and definitely if they don't, because then they don't get to build that relationship with movement and play and cooperation and team, like all those kind of, what some might say inherent traits of sport, but what we would say is it only happens if the coach is aware of it. It only happens if the organization or the community is aware of it, and that the girl is, or the young person is, an active participant in that. And one other thing that I'll say is core to our philosophy with how we work with organizations, how we work with coaches, and how we support coaches and organizations to work with youth is self-directed learning. So when we think of development and when we think of, just like human understanding of each other and empathy, there are no experts. Like, the expert is the person, the individual, what is good for them, what they like to do, how they like to play, how they like to learn. And so what we try to do with a little bit of structure is create spaces and opportunities for coaches first, because we work directly with coaches and organizations, to guide us and what they want to learn, what they want to prioritize. And then in turn, we hope that they create spaces for young people so that young people, girls, can guide what they like to do, what feels good for them, what leadership looks like for them, and And in that way, you know, kind of subvert some of those traditional sport and traditional education systems that just haven't really worked up to this point. So yeah, a couple of strategies in there. Hopefully that started us off a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. It certainly did. Isabel, do you have anything? What successful strategies have you seen?
Well, first I want to say thanks to everyone who spoke before, man. I'm sitting here going, oh man, I understand that. Oh man, that's so true. Nora, I'd love to speak to you one day because man, that was awesome. I'm actually gonna start off with a story that kind of puts a little bit of what Dr. Finkel was talking about and what Nora was mentioning, because it did direct a lot of how I've spent the last 10, 15 years coaching. At one point, I was asked by the Quebec Soccer Association to kind of go for the certification to be able to coach provincial and national level teams. They wanted to encourage more women to get the coaching certificate. So I was like, okay, no problem. So I went. There were 52 participants in the program, and there were 2 women, me and 1 other. So already you can see this is going to go real well. When we got there, and I'm half Spanish, half Italian. That is my background. So you can imagine that soccer or football is huge. In Quebec, a lot of the coaches come from Italian, Greek, very competitive and very male-oriented soccer backgrounds. And for this course, there were 2 elements. The first element was we had to get a mentor. So someone who was going to follow us throughout the year, check our journal, check our work, et cetera, et cetera. So for the region of Quebec that you were from, they gave you a list of mentors that you can contact and find someone to mentor you. So for my region, there were 4 mentors. I emailed all 4. And I still have the emails because one of these days I'm going to get on Quebec Soccer and tell them how biased they are. All 4 refused me, and all 4 refused because I was a woman and I didn't know soccer. So I was like, okay, well, how am I supposed to do this certification if I don't have a mentor who wants to mentor me? So eventually I did find a mentor because I'm half Spanish, half Italian, and I talk a lot. So you know, a little nudge here and a little nudge there to the right people and a little threat to go to the media was enough to find someone who was willing to mentor me. But the other female coach, because she didn't have that confidence to challenge, she dropped out. So having 2 women, we went down to 1 woman, which was me. So course goes through the whole year. At the end, we have a practical exam. And the practical exam is they take a group of student athletes, and those student athletes, we run a 30-minute practice with them based on what they had given us. My time with these kids, these were 12 and 13-year-old boys and girls. My time with them was at 3:30 in the afternoon. They've been there since 9 o'clock in the morning. So when I got to them, I can already tell just from, Dr. Finkel was talking about empathy. And this is a great example of that. Like I could just tell the kids were fed up. They've been doing practices since 9 o'clock this morning, you know, that morning with different types of coaches, people yelling at them, people telling them to do, they're exhausted. So I got there and I can see it. Like their eyes, they were staring at the sky, they were staring at the flowers. They weren't even paying attention. So I decided to start my practice by cracking a joke. Right? And I went up to them and I'm like, so who does not want to be here right now? And I put up my hand, all the kids started laughing. They all put up their hands. And, you know, like I just started breaking the ice and stuff, but I lost 10 minutes of my practice because I was focusing on getting these kids motivated again. I almost failed my exam because the evaluators told me I was spending too much time talking to the kids. And I was like, Like, so you're more interested in making them run and do the drills than you are in actually paying attention to the poor kid that's there in front of me. And that was the moment where I realized that I didn't want to coach competitive soccer anymore. I wasn't interested. If the competition was all about just making the athlete play the sport and win the game, then that's not what I wanted. And my strategy at that point became coaching the whole player. So I take the players that I work with, male, female, little kids, the little 4-year-olds, all the way up to senior level players. I've coached everyone. And I focus on a whole person development. So my objective is to use soccer to give the tools that they need to be better people. So we'll talk about, like one of the things that my players hate, but they understand, is that they all have to wear their shin pads to practice. Man, what do you mean I have to wear the shin pads to practice? And I'm just like, guys, I'm like, it's very simple. Can you play a soccer game without your shin pads? No. I'm like, why? Because it's a rule. I'm like, exactly. I'm like, if you have any respect at all for your game, then you need to learn to respect the rules. The rules are there for a reason. So we start talking about respect for the rules, respect for the opponents, respect for themselves, respect for their teammates. We talk about perseverance, that when things are going horribly wrong, does the score count or does my performance count? And every little element that I talk about on the pitch, I try to link it to something that they can do off the pitch, so that all of the characteristics that make a championship player make a valuable person. And then that person takes all of that and leads it off the field. And if I look at the players that I took to Cameroon in 2011, I took a team of 11 women, young women, and 3 young men to Cameroon for, I don't remember what it was, 4 weeks, to work with, at the time, the Cameroon Football Development Program. Those players, if I look at those players now, they're completely different people than they were in 2011, but they're all people who are in positions to create new leaders of tomorrow. There's teachers, there's doctors, there's police officers, everyone wanted to give back to the community in some way, shape, or form. So that whole player development for me is the strategy that I use now, because I can't stand that competition feeling anymore, because they've taken it to a level where they forgot the player and are only thinking of the statistics. And I think that was the wrong way to go. And I'm going to stop talking, because like Nora, I can talk all day.
Thank you both. You brought up really good points. Oh, it is weird to see yourself spotlighted. But before we ask Caroline and Nene to speak on this, I want to invite Dr. Finkel to share a final perspective of how being on a team helps build girls' leadership skills, because I know she'll have to leave here soon.
Apologies, I really hate to kind of leave this wonderful conversation. How will it help girls? I think I have like a couple of things. They will sound disconnected, but I promise you they're all adding up to one piece. One piece of information that is out there is, I looked it up, and only as of today, I mean, not today per se, but the most recent data shows that only 10% of teenage girls are actually getting the physical activity. This is a global average that they need. Only 10%. I mean, I think we all live in our little bubble, so you are seeing the most active girls around you. But when you put it on the global average, it only adds up to 10%. And if we think that sport is important to kind of help you develop physically, help you develop mentally, to have a better person, as you have all been alluding, a whole person, only 10% of our girls are getting it, right? So this really sets us up in a very steep hill. So that's one thing that I think sports does it from the get-go. But being part of a team, I think, is really important for all of us. I mean, this even in this like very strange time of COVID, right? We are kind of like going back into our little groups that we're shown that despite all regulations, we can exist as one. We need others to kind of go through the day. We need connections, and sports, I think, for many of the girls around the world, is this legitimate way to connect, right? Like many places, Cameroon is not the only place. I grew up in Turkey and I loved soccer, but I would never was allowed to go to a soccer game, right? To watch the professional players because it was too rude, too loud, too kind of something that my parents did not want me to be exposed, right? So it takes me away from, like, I'm always a spectator on the side and not even on the side in the real life. But 2 years ago, somehow somebody passed a law in Turkey that women go in free and to professional soccer games, and there's a law against profanity. I mean, that changed the whole system. So it is such a funny celebration to see the soccer fields now full of young girls, families, you know, like, and it brings a different level of civility to the whole game. Now it's like a joint piece. So I think that sports does a world of good to the individual, to the communities where those individuals belong. And beyond that, it actually changes the way that we think things, right? We're talking about girls, but there are a lot of young boys who also don't fit the mold, right? So they don't feel that competitive. They don't feel that kind of macho in themselves to kind of take onto the field, and they drop out. So the lack of human the capability investment, all the goods that would come out of being part of a team, that would come out of being playing and being mentored with these wonderful role models. We're not even there yet, right? That's another piece of the equation. Seeing what can be done and allowing yourself to enjoy it, right? How many of us have heard the individual, like, it's not the end result, it's the journey, but our lives do not allow us to live to that expectation. But taking a little bit out of competition, out of the competitive sports, I think would allow so many more people to see in themselves to play it, right? And then get whatever benefits. It won't be the benefits that Nora and Isabel would have gotten it, but nonetheless, there's so much benefit that can go around a little bit more widely. I think that would also change the way that we see, because these people, soccer players on the field and off the field, are very visible people. So that's my very last point before I have to leave this wonderful conversation, is that the role models, we keep talking about role models. And I personally said the leader is not the one visible, but seeing the visibility of sports is something we don't have in any other aspects of life, right? The doctors are not always visible unless you're sick. Only when you go to the hospital, you see a female doctor and you may think about a role model. Sports, just like politics, is very public. So we all have a little bit of affinity, and seeing sports that is wildly accessible, that is inclusive, that is all kinds of women, all kinds of men, not one type, right? It allows us to see ourselves being part of that community one way or another. So once again, I thank all of you. You guys are doing a wonderful thing, not only for sport, but for all of us, and especially for in the name of gender equality. I can't applaud, and maybe one day in Cameroon, I get to kind of come and see the young girls play, and I'll have my t-shirt wearing very proudly. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Finkel. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Awesome. Nene and Caroline, based on your work with Open Field, what are some successful strategies that you have seen to help develop girls' leadership skills?
Yeah, well, we are working with the adolescents. Most of our youth are below 20 years, and they're very distracted at that age. So what we do is we give them relevant skills, like we take a pre-test, we give them what they want. We don't just give them topics, because there are some topics that are irrelevant. So after our pre-test, we'll see what they want, we'll give them the skills. And we don't just end there, we do constant follow-up. We organize workshop for them like 3 times or 4 times so that they come, we can, through the workshop, we can get their flares and we'll see how we can overcome their challenges. And even the tournament organized for the girls is still a part of the strategy we use to follow them up, because each, like now in this year, they have matches every Friday. So we'll go to the field before they do the topics on mental health. We have to evaluate them to see if they are actually progressing, because mentoring a girl child is constant follow-up, because at every moment they are distracted, they easily flare. So we do constant follow-up to see how they are doing. And from other girls who have been participating, there's physical improvement, because we can see from the activities in school, even those who don't have the opportunity to go to school, where they are in their other training or phase of life, we see physical outputs, and even in their community. We also have what we call youth council for girls in their clubs or their teams. They will have youth councils. So those youth councils are their leaders that mentors them, especially when we go for their meetings. The youth councils are the ones to expand, to talk to them. We always go there to correct them. So just seeing their friends, teaching them and leading them, they have interest, in our own, where we find ourselves, little girls like listening to their peers rather than to adults. So those are some of the strategies we use for the girls.
Yeah, like what Nene says, we organize tournaments for the girls. Before, we usually organize tournaments only for the boys, not the girls. So the girls were kept aside. But now Open Field has taken this opportunity to organize a tournament for the girls. So what we do is that we train some of the youth councils where they'll be the leaders for their peers. And by so doing, we make sure we train them constantly, like the workshop.
Oh no. They're frozen, right? It's not just on my screen.
Yeah, they are.
Hold on, Nene and Caroline.
Ask them to turn off their camera, because sometimes it will help stabilize the connection, and at least we'd be able to hear them.
Okay, thank you. Nene and Caroline, would you be able to turn your video off? And maybe we'd be able to hear you a little bit better.
I think we might have lost them for now.
They're back.
They're back.
Okay.
Caroline, would you be able to finish what you were saying? It just had cut out.
Yes.
Network.
Why we create these team captains and match delegates is because we discovered that most of the girls listen to their peers, and most of them express themselves to their peers more than us. So what happened? We go to the peers. We normally have this workshop where we bring them together, and then we try to ask them some of the difficulties and the challenges that they face. So some of those things come up, and then we try to see how we can address them. And then we'll also make them have that self-confidence. They can decide, because before now, a girl child is not allowed to go to the field. So with these barriers that we break, they are able now to understand or to see the importance of sports into their life. It's not just coming to the field for body fitness, but they have some certain topics that we treat with them. So that's how we do with our girls.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the different ways that you have seen success in helping build your girls' leadership skills. So Isabel, how do you think being a part of a team helps girls gain leadership skills?
Well, I think it's going to depend on the team that the young woman is a part of. It will depend on the guidance that that person can get from the coaches as well. I'm just speaking from experience here in Montreal and in Quebec. When Dr. Finkel was talking about like 10% of girls are actually active, I can believe that, because a lot of the soccer clubs here will have started women's teams or girls teams because they want the girls to play, but then they can't find coaches to coach the teams. Because your hyper competitive coaches try to coach the girls the way they've been taught, forgetting that girls' mentality and girls' psychological development is not the same as boys. So some of their ways of doing things don't work out. So they quit. And then you'll have a dad that will take over. And the dad doesn't really coach the girls. It's just he's there on the bench to make sure that the team can play. So there's no guidance for the players themselves. If the girl does have the proper guidance, I think sport, one of the big things that sport could give a player or a young woman is confidence. Confidence in herself, confidence in working with the team. And with that confidence would come the ability to start going further. You know, if I'm confident in who I am and what I do, then I'll be more confident to share it with my teammates. And then as I build the confidence of the team, like the leadership kind of builds up from that confidence. But at the same time, you need to have a safe space to be able to build that confidence, and it doesn't necessarily always happen. So I think the key thing for women, for young girls to develop into leaders, is to have a safe space on the field to be able to do so. So it's not only about the sport itself. I think it would also be the people that are there to help make that leader. So I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but it could be any sport, but the person that's there to help guide that young girl is the one that will make or break the future leader. Because if they don't give her a safe space to develop, if they don't give her a safe space to gain confidence, if they don't treat her with respect, if they don't allow her to kind of grow into who she is meant to be, then we lose the leader before we gain the leader. So that safe space that is created in the sport, that is probably more important than the sport itself.
Thank you. Yeah, a safe space is definitely important. Nora, how do you think being a part of a team helps build these leadership skills?
Yeah, I feel like my answers for these questions are always going to be, it depends. And yeah, I'm not going to repeat what Isabel said, because I agree that it just depends on the choices, the decisions that the coach makes, what kind of culture that they create on that field. Because the culture that I kind of see as like, we're up against a culture that exists, especially you look at the US, the sport culture is very strong, and like what sport is. And it's very, I know Dr. Finkel was talking about like the traditionally, I like to use these when I talk about traditionally masculine characteristics. And then you look at the rest of the world and you see there's just different understandings of what sport is and what sport can do. And sometimes there's more space. I've experienced more space outside of the United States to evolve like what that sport culture, what that team culture can look like. Because yeah, just again, in my experience, the US just feels very rigid with what that is. And so what can that do? Anything, really. Like it can do anything and it can do nothing. Like, you know, like it really just depends on what it is. So I just kind of going back and thinking to practically, so for if anyone's listening and wants something practical about what we're talking about here, I can share a quick example of a game that we would play, which is easy to talk through because you don't have to actually see it. Imagine a traditional game of football or soccer. So two teams playing against the other. But in this game, everybody starts out walking. So no one can run. If a player scores a goal, that player can run. As the coach, traditionally, you might say, you have to make sure everyone can run. No, I would say, let's see what they do. Like, let's see if they realize if they keep scoring a goal, only they can run. Or if they pass to their teammates will be able to run as well. So like, that's the kind of self-directed learning. Let them figure it out. They will figure it out. Like, let them do it. And then once they've figured it out, let's pause and discuss, what does this mean in your community? What does it mean to, what does the goal represent? What does the pass to your teammate represent? How are you supporting each other, lifting each other up? And so that's the kind of intentional team space, intentional culture, intentional sport that we do and that we share with our partners, so that you're not just trusting you kick a ball out and they're playing as a team and that's going to solve all your problems. It won't. It will recreate problems. It will, yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. So yeah, I think it just depends. And there are so many strategies out there. So I would encourage anyone looking to create that kind of culture to, yeah, ask more questions, check out what Open Field is doing, ask us. Like, there's just so much that exists that is really useful in creating a very different kind of sport and team culture. I hope that answered your question, kind of.
It did. Thank you. So I want to move to one of the questions in the chat that I saw that is for Nene and Caroline, that says, I would be interested to hear your thoughts and any examples on the role of girls and young women as peer leaders in Cameroon.
Yeah, I will just speak on behalf of Carol and I. Am I mute? Can you get me?
Yeah.
Okay, role of the youth councils for the girls. They are the leaders of the team, and what they do is that, since as they act like match delegates, referees, captains of their various teams. So they are the head of the team. They do organize meeting, and some of the challenges that the youth face, they report to their youth council, because even the youth council, they have an executive body amongst them. You have the president, you have the vice, you have the person in charge of community service, and you have the social impact coordinator. So it is a whole team that they have meetings like every month to discuss about their team, what is happening in that community. So they actually act like a middleman. They take information to the youth council, community leaders, and to the office. So most of the crises that they face in the team, the problems, the information is given to the youth councils. So that is the role of the youth councils in each of the teams.
And one more, if they act as they control the team when the staff is not around, because we have community leader who controls the community. So the youth council, when the community leader is not, they take in charge. They controls the meetings, the training, the matches.
And since as we are interested in giving the leadership qualities, it's just for 1 year. After 1 year, we have to change. After 1 year, we do another election for different people to come up and so give them opportunity to exploit their talents.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing more on the peer leaders in Cameroon. That was definitely super helpful. And then I want to come back to Judy's question in the chat that asks, how do we get more women and men to understand how to coach girls, and how do we teach them to be those effective coaches for girls? So Nora, would you be able to speak on this first?
Yeah, that's kind of our job. So I hope we know how to do that. We are called coaches across continents, so there's some implied there that, but we don't coach kids. We coach coaches and organizations. Very important for us, because these women that you're hearing from today, they're the experts. They know what's happening in Cameroon. We're never going to tell Nene and Caroline, this is what you need to do, these are your problems, and this is how to solve them. That's what Western NGOs did throughout history, and it didn't help anybody. In fact, it caused a lot of damage. So, and I think the same thing with coaches and kids, right? It's like, how can you stop telling them what to do and allow them to figure it out for themselves? So we need more value assigned to this kind of work. That's what I said in the beginning about shifting value systems. Stop valuing just competitive sport. The problem is value often looks like this. It's about money. And so, I mean, it's not just a sports issue, it's an everything issue. It's like there's capitalism everywhere. And so I think if we can like really challenge those from the grassroots level, those traditional value systems in sport, and just share your knowledge, share what you do, share a game that's a little bit different, a strategy that's a little bit different. And then, support more organizations that are doing it differently. So we love that we're uniquely positioned. We work with over 100 organizations all over the world that are similar to Open Fields, who have passion for sport, but mostly a passion for doing education differently. And sport is a part of that. And so, but we're not the only ones. There's so many. And so I think events like this shed light on what's happening. Let's get more people involved. The US is really unique, but there are incredible organizations doing it, like Open Fields, and we have a couple of other partners there as well. But the US is a unique situation. So I think the US has a lot to learn from Cameroon in this space. We have, I think, 6 partners in Cameroon. There's a lot of organizations doing it. It's a tough question to answer, but I think it's shift our value systems and find the groups that are already doing that, and they're doing it very practically. It's not theory, like they're doing it every single day on the ground.
Thank you for answering that one. Nene and Caroline, do you have any thoughts on how we can teach women and men to become effective coaches for girls?
On our own part, is just, first of all, the knowledge and constant follow-up, because if we give them the knowledge, they can really, women in positions really do better than men. From my own working with NGO, when you give a woman a position, it takes all her time and she wants to do the best. So what we need is just the knowledge. If we can have the skills and we do constant follow-up, I think we'll have so many women to be part of this, of coaching or sport.
I also think devotion. You have to devote your mind if you want to really involve. You have to devote that. I want to be involved. So for me, I think devotion to is one of the greatest tools.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. The devotion and the knowledge are definitely beneficial there. And Isabel, I saw that you had touched on this in the chat, but would you like to expand on your answer and share your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if anybody saw, but as Nora was talking, I was like,
Sorry.
Yeah, you gave her the claps.
I was like, that 100 times. I would go a bit further on that as well, is to break the stereotypes. Right now, if you look at the way soccer associations train their coaches, they train their coaches the same way they've been training their coaches for however long they've been around, where the focus is on the statistic and the focus is no longer on the player. This bugs me a lot. I get very emotional when I talk about this, because I've had to quit teams. I've had to give up opportunities because they were unhappy with me, because I would bench the goal scorer of the team because this person thought it was okay to not come to practice. And they come and tell me, no, you have to put the player on the team. I'm like, well, what kind of message are you sending to this player by telling them you can break the rules, but you can still play, right? So the stereotypes that the statistic of the game is more important than the development of the player has to go. That would be number one. Number two, I think that there has to be more psychology put into training coaches, because the development, I'm in a weird position because I work in a museum, so I already work on informal education. I've had people ask me, it's like, why aren't you a teacher? And I'm like, yeah, can you see me being stuck in a box doing what these people tell me to teach? I'm like, no, thank you. Like, no, thank you. So I work in informal education, finding unique and different ways of teaching different people. But I mean, like, so I work in a museum. I teach catechism in 4 different churches in Montreal, another form of informal education. And in all of these elements, when we talk about informal education, we talk about sensory learners, and we talk about cognitive learners, and we talk about emotional learners. So if we have these different types of learners, why don't we apply that as a coach on a soccer field? Why am I trying to teach all the players in the exact same way and expect them all to respond to me in the exact same way when they're all individual players? So that psychology element is really important. I've coached both girls and boys. I've coached senior men and I've coached senior women. Let me tell you, whole different ballgame. Whole different ball. I can go up to a guy and say, you played like blah, blah, blah shit. And the guy is going to be like, and he's going to get all mad at me and he's going to go out and prove me wrong. If I say those exact same words to a woman, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown and she's going to break down and I'm not going to know what, like, the way you speak is very different. They react very differently. For girls, at age 12, 13, 14, girls will join sports, especially for the social element. Girls are more social creatures than the guys are. So if at 13 and 14 years old, as a coach, you're only focusing on winning the game and you're taking away that social element that she is craving, she's going to quit soccer. And here in Canada, one of the ages where we lose the most amount of female players is at age 13 and 14. They'll start coming back at around 17 and 18 years old because now they've found their identity. They know who they are, they know what they want to do, and they might come back if they're strong enough to do it. But they left at 13 years old because they weren't getting what they wanted. So I think that psychology and understanding how the different age groups and the different sexes respond to their own personal growth is really important. And we don't do that enough at all.
Yeah, that's certainly an important point to bring up, the psychology aspect of it all.
I got it. I got it, Justin. I got it. See, I stopped.
Awesome, thank you. So I do want to point out that we are at 10, and we're ending close to the end of the conversation, but we want to take a moment and thank everyone for attending. And I want to take a special moment to thank Nene, Caroline, Isabel, Nora, and Dr. Finkel for participating in the conversation and sharing their wisdom. So we will stay on a little bit longer for any last questions, but thank you all for attending and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you so much, Gwen. Yes, and thanks again, Nora, Isabel, Nene, Caroline. This has been amazing. Really, really appreciate you all. You all make Open Field what we are, right? And as I think Nora said, you know, with Nene and Caroline being in the field, they are the coaches, they are the mentors, they are the role models, they are the ones who have the different philosophy and the psychology to be able to understand and interact with the girls that we work with. And that's the take that, you know, we as Open Field take, and so many other organizations, like Nora said, around the world that are using sport to make this impact. So we really want to thank everyone for joining. And I think we can go ahead and stop the Facebook Live, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and hope you get to enjoy the conversation, you know, in perpetuity. And then, yeah, for any panelists that do want to stay on, we're happy to kind of hang around and talk for a few minutes. And yeah, if not, we can just end right here. It's so wonderful to see so many supporters join in. Thank you so much.
Justin, I have a question for any of the panelists who remain. You know, one of the things that I learned from you, I think early on when you started this organization, was that you were hoping, at that time boys, but I think now both boys and girls, that playing this sport would help to motivate them and become, more balanced socially and so on, but also to motivate them to stay in school. So I'd like to ask each of the panelists, to what extent have you seen that playing soccer, as many of you say, playing football, helps to keep the young people in school, and to what extent does it convince the parents to allow the parent, particularly the parents of the girls, to stay in school?
I can answer that one because I'm on that. I started a soccer program at a college here in Montreal, and the soccer program was both men and women. And remember, I was talking in my personal experience, and what I value as a coach is the development of a whole player. So when we would have tryouts for the teams, one of the first things that we would point out to the students is that you are student athletes, not athlete students. So the student element was always emphasized first. We created, with the director of sports at the college, we created a tutoring program. I spoke to all of the teachers, and I talked to the teachers about how I want to teach the students responsibility, that you can't skip practice because you have to write a paper. You have to learn to organize your time so that you have time to go to practice and do your paper. So working with the teachers, we developed programs. The teachers would keep me appraised. So at halfway through the session, I would get an evaluation of how all the athletes were doing. At the end of the session, I would get their grades. And even though at the college and university levels, you're supposed to maintain a very specific grade to be able to be eligible to play, my request for my players was even higher. It was above the basic average that's requested by the province to play. But I found that, number one, it was important to get the teachers on board. You had to show respect to the teachers to understand where they're coming from and see how you can incorporate your program into what the teachers are doing. I found that was very important. The parents, because these were college-age kids, the parents are a little less important, but they're still important because this was a private college and they spend a lot of money to send their kids there, and everybody drives in with their BMWs and Audis and whatnot. So the money issue what was an issue for parents. So usually my answer to parents was very simple. I'm like, how much do you want your child to succeed? I'm like, there's only so much money you can throw at the problem. If you want your child to succeed, you need to help them understand what their roles and responsibilities are. I'm like, let them fail if they need to fail. Congratulate them when they achieve. I'm like, but let them learn on their own and trust us, the coaches and the teachers, to do what's best for them.
Thanks, Isabel. Can we hear from Nene and Caroline and maybe Nora, and if we want to kind of wrap us up with this? I think this is a really important question. So it's a nice way to kind of, I think, finish the conversation.
Yes, in our own case, we have a triangle relationship. That's the staff, the child, and the parents. So before we even start our program, we have what we call parental notice. The mother or the father have to sign that your child is authorized to participate in the program. So when the child is participating in the program, we do a constant follow-up. And from the output of the youth, because most often we meet the parents at home, we talk to the parents. How is your child doing? Especially our life skill topics are so flexible on self-respect, bad influence. So if your child is not improving in the house and in school, it means there's a problem. So we also do even evaluation surveys. And from the meetings we hold with parents, they testify to us that the program is really helping their youth. The reports we have from the schools that they attend, their teachers, their education has improved. Those who are really performing very low, they have improved. So we do constant follow-up, because if they, sometimes even the parents who are so reluctant that no, my girl child cannot play soccer, but at the end, when they saw the need for the child and the outcome of the child, they have accepted the program. That is why we started very small, started with like 20 girls, but now we are going up to 100 girls, which shows that the program is attractive and is helping the girls. But we work, the three of us, the staff, the parents, and the youth.
Most of our sessions are after school sessions. So we make sure they go to school in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we have our sessions. And then we also have our CEO usually come with some awards like books, pens, school bags, and things like that. We encourage them by giving them books, bags, those writing materials for those that make it in their different exams. So you encourage them to learn. That's what we do.
I don't think there's too much for me to add. I think what we really try to do is support our partners with those kinds of solutions, but sharing them across. So like, those are great ideas. What if an organization in Colombia is struggling with the same thing? Can we share open fields ideas with them? And maybe they'll work in, of course, in an adapted way. And the only other thing I could add is curriculum for the on-field portion of what you do is so important. And how can that be a complement to what are they learning in school? Because sometimes that traditional education just isn't doing it, because we know schools, it's a UN SDG for a reason. They're not doing the quality job that we want them to do. So how can the play part, the fun part, when they come to you, how can it be a complement to what they're doing? So bring in some math. Like, you guys know mingle, mingle. We can do mingle, mingle, mingle.
Yes.
Do math. Yeah. We can do so many things to bring in geography, or bring it, like, there's so many ways to use play and movement as part of that. So I think, yeah, like, I think what we try to do is form that bond between a young person and movement, and a young person and learning. And so if that can happen with you, hopefully, like, when they go back to school, like, they're curious, and they're like, learning isn't a burden anymore. It's like, oh, like, I can go share this with my friends, what I learned in school, even if maybe the method in school is sometimes kind of boring, which I think we all know it can be. But yeah, that's the only thing I would add. But I think there's organizations that are doing incredible work around this. So congratulations, Caroline and Nene.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Definitely. Thank you so much. I think that's a nice way to kind of wrap it up and put a bow on it. It's just like the influence of sport, especially intentionally designed sport programs with coaches who get it and want to, support the development of the whole player, how it makes an impact in school, at home, in the community, which is certainly what we strive to do, right? Far beyond the playing field. So thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you.